With you, man.
How you doing, dude?
It's good, man. Wow. All right. Yeah, I just started the recording, so basically, I'm just gonna ask you just some a series of questions about you and your entrepreneurship, and you just ramble on as you want. Um, how's your day been so far?
Been good, nice and sunny. Can't complain.
That's awesome, man. Do you have your webcam working?
It does, but it hangs my computer, so I usually don't use it on Skype.
All right, totally fine. All right, so let's go ahead and hop into this. All right, so one of the questions I wanted to just jump into is like, at what point in your life did you realize you wanted to be an entrepreneur and why? Because a lot of questions have been circling around that.
I don't know. I mean, I kind of always wanted to do it. I never was really the type of person who likes sitting behind a desk in one place doing one thing. I think probably, I don't know. I mean, maybe like 5 or so years into my career, I just got really sick of sitting behind a desk. I don't like working for other people. I've got a big mouth. I'm very opinionated. And whenever I had a full-time job, I tended to get fired anyway. Yeah. So I figured it was probably best that I did not work for somebody else. So yeah, I mean, I would say it really kind of was solidified maybe about 5 or 6 years after I started working. You know, I was living in Florida for a while, so kind of near your neck of the woods, but South Florida, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and I moved back up to Boston 2002, and that was at the bottom of the first .com bust, and there was like no jobs. I was working the shittiest jobs. I worked some of the worst. I mean, my background's in design and branding, and I worked some job like editing stuff for like middle school textbooks in California for like $18 an hour, and it was the worst job ever. And then I went and worked for some agencies, and I just couldn't stand it there, and I just figured, you know what, I should probably just do my own thing.
Yeah, I totally get it. I understand. So you came from Florida? Were you born in Florida?
No, so I was born just outside of Boston, about 30 minutes west of Boston. Grew up in the same house, small town, my whole life. Then went to school in Virginia for a year, then transferred out and finished out in Arizona and Tucson for the next 4. And then I moved to South Florida for about 5 years, and then I came back here. And who knows what's next.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. That's cool, but I definitely get why you start doing what you're doing. $18, like.
It wasn't just that. I mean, I was happy to have anything. The thing is, it's like when the .com bubble busted. Like there were so many designers, it was just everybody got fired. So there was just a glut of talent, and you know, a lot of agencies just like went under and stuff like that. So you just kind of took what you could get. But I think it was just it was more the quality of the work. The quality of the work was just so crappy.
Oh, okay. So you just had to do everything yourself and just create something else.
Yeah, well, I mean, that specific work that I was doing was just so boring, and I'm kind of like a history buff, and so I was editing history textbooks, and I remember going to like the editor of like this company and saying like, you have stuff in here that's like factually incorrect, and they were like, well, you know, we can't do anything about it because in order to change any of the curriculum in a textbook in any state, particularly in California, it's like this whole political process. They're like, don't even bother. And I thought, well, what a waste of time. And you know, I don't really like doing stuff that doesn't accomplish anything. And I'm like thinking like, you know, what the hell am I doing? And that's kind of, you know, when you do a lot of agency work and stuff like that, you get a lot of that. You kind of just, some of the stuff is cool, but some of the stuff you kind of start questioning either the purpose of it or if it's just something that's particularly enjoyable for you.
Yeah, I get it. So you kind of felt out of control when it came to that process?
I think I felt more bored and kind of resentful and pissed off. Probably be like the better terminology for it.
So you felt like it could be better, right?
Oh yeah, I felt like it could be way better.
Yeah. All right. So the next question, I'm just gonna ask you. Just gonna pull random things off the list. It's not gonna be in any particular order.
Go ahead, fire away.
All right. What is the number one characteristic about yourself that has served you the most in becoming the person you are today?
I'd like to say that I'm bullheaded. Probably I have a lot of fire and a lot of passion. I know that's kind of like a stock answer, and it's funny. I'm not like into like the whole like signs of the zodiac or anything like that. But a few years ago, someone's like, what's your sign? And I'm like an Aries. They're like, you got to check it out, and it's like me to a T. So Aries is like the fire sign, and I'm the type of person like I go into something. You could probably hear it in my voice. Like I don't like taking no for an answer. I definitely don't. Like, I have no patience. I don't like sitting in meetings. I hate process. One of the reasons I didn't really like being a designer is I thought it was, like, too tedious. I don't like working with people who, like, don't go after it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I get super impatient about that. And I love challenging people and stuff like that. So I'd say that's probably my best characteristic is the fact that I'm just very aggressive and very assertive, and I go after stuff, and I will dig into stuff, like, really, really hard. I think you need that. I think you have to be tenacious. I think that you have to be willing to take no for an answer. And, part of my French, but I think you have to not be willing to take any shit.
I feel you on that. Definitely don't take no shit from nobody. So you gotta like whenever I think the biggest thing about being an entrepreneur is just being able to handle your own problems, because a lot of times it's just you and that problem. You gotta figure that out by yourself.
I definitely think that self-sufficiency is a big key.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say kind of less on like the kind of fiery personality side, because my background is creative, is being able to creatively solve problems, being innovative. When people say that you have to be creative in business, that's so true. And creative doesn't mean that you have to be like an artist. Creative is just ability, to me, is an ability to think creatively, which to me is an ability to kind of think differently, to think innovatively, to kind of, even though I hate this term, think outside of the box, come up with new solutions for problems. It's kind of like I have an older sister who's a doctor and had thought that she wanted to open a bakery because she's a really great baker and she loves doing it. And I was telling her, I'm like, if you're not up every day for the challenge, like if you don't like to be challenged, don't do this. Like you have to like being challenged because every day is going to have a series of problems. And there's a certain type of person who looks at a problem and is like, oh crap, this is a problem. It's like the worst thing in the world. And there's another type of person who looks at a problem and says, well, this is an opportunity, or this is interesting, or this is just, a hurdle I have to get over. And my point is the first type of person looks at the problem thing. It's just how we've been conditioned. You hear the word problem, and then you kind of have this idea in your head that it's negative. You associate negativity with the word problem. Whereas problem, to me, is just things that come up every day in life. Most things are a problem. And a problem, some people like to reframe that by saying challenge. But whatever, I call it a problem. But I don't think problems are bad things. They're just they're things.
Yeah,
they're things that need to be overcome. Exactly. And that's life, overcoming things.
Exactly, they're just things in your way. You just gotta get over them.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I totally get that. Can you go into depth a little more on exactly what you do though? Like, what's your business and what do you do?
Yeah, so I used to. Maybe the way you found me is I had a business with a business partner out in Colorado it's her business. It was called Entrepreneur. So she has a background in the fashion industry, and she was a handbag designer. And I had met her, and my background was kind of like an interactive and sales funnels and stuff like that. And so we had kind of built the business up to train people how to create like their own product-based businesses. We closed that last September. So really what I do now is I do consulting, and so I do mostly like brand and strategy consulting, some marketing consulting. I work with companies on how to better frame like their pitches and stuff like that. So I work right now with a company in the retail technology space. They're a startup company, and so these guys are pretty successful. This guy sold his last company for $280 million. And so now he has a new company, and I'm helping him develop all of his pitches. He's going out to Vegas in a couple of days for a big startup competition. And so I help him with all his pitches and all his stuff like that when he gets in front of major retailers like Guess and Chanel and The Gap and Ralph Lauren and stuff like that. So that's part of my business. And then the other thing I do, kind of unique, is I'm also a trader. So I have a big background on the financial markets.
Mm-hmm.
And as a currency and futures trader. So I do that as well, and I'm working in conjunction. Right now at this point, I kind of have my hands in a few pies, which just really suits me because I like doing that. I like having a lot of different things going on. So I have that going on, and I help build an online actually very, very good online trading platform. I wish I could say I created it, but I didn't. And then the last thing that I do, believe it or not, is I'm starting to represent some online influencers and fashion bloggers as their manager.
Wow.
Which is kind of an interesting thing for me because I like that because I get to do, I get to help them work on the deals. I get to help them kind of really build out their brand platform and strategize about where they want to go, which to me is really, really interesting. And what I like about that is that takes more of a business part of it where I can really start thinking about how do I build them as a business, and then if it works out, I can take a piece of it.
Okay. So you just kind of like a serial entrepreneur, but more like doing like contract work?
Some of it's contract work, some of it's equity-based work.
I don't understand. Munch me never more like that. Do you like?
Serious. All right, what were you saying? Sorry about that.
I said some of it's contract work and some of it's equity, based work. Some of it I just take a piece.
Okay.
And and all of this is it's funny. I have a friend who, have you ever heard of the website karmaloop.com?
Yeah.
So a friend of mine's a former COO of Karmaloop.
Wow.
And they went through a transition. He's no longer there, and he's kind of doing the same thing. And so we sit down every so often, but he's kind of doing the same thing. Whereas at this point we're kind of planning our next move. Like, what's the next thing that we really want to get into? Because I've done enough things. Like, I don't want to wade into something and really spend like all of my time unless it's something that A, I really love doing, and B, I think there's good money in.
Yeah, I totally get it. Yeah, that's awesome. So do you love what you're doing?
Parts of it I really like. Parts of it are just kind of, I would say, keeping the time right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely like the fact that I get to make my own schedule. And, frankly, if there's something I don't want to do, I just don't do it. I mean, I don't take everything that comes across my desk, for sure. I don't take every meeting that comes across my desk. So I tend to be pretty choosy. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that if you're going to do your own thing, you've got to get really good at setting boundaries.
Yeah, say no to a lot more things.
Yeah, or just be selective. I mean, if you happen to be in a position where you're getting a lot of stuff that you like, then say yes to a lot of things. But if you don't, then don't say yes to it.
Yeah, most definitely. I agree. All right, so let's move on to the next question. What was your biggest failure and how did you overcome it?
My biggest failure? Probably almost going broke.
Wow.
Yeah, I came pretty close to going broke. I had to borrow like $8,000 from my sister a number of years ago, which is kind of humiliating. Just a lot of bad business decisions, a lot of bad financial decisions. That's hard, I think, particularly as a guy, because we attach a lot of stuff to money. Yeah. That was very difficult. I think the way to overcome it, I don't know. I mean, I guess I just had to get down and get to work. And I think a lot of it was starting to understand, any issues I had with money, like why was it that I was going broke. I think the hardest thing is taking responsibility for your own BS and saying, I got to fix this. And particularly if it's, money tends to be a very emotional thing. And so having to take responsibility and saying, hey, I got to fix this.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, so was that like one of the most stressful moments for you?
Yeah, that was definitely not super fun.
Yeah, but
that was like one of those times where you're like, this sucks. When is it going to end? It's like everybody gets in those times where like they're in a bad situation and they don't think it's going to end. Someone said it's like being on the dark side of the moon, like when the back in the Apollo days when they would orbit the moon.
Yeah.
When you get to the dark side of the moon, you can't see the sun or the earth or anything. You have no orientation, no idea where you're going. And everybody gets there at one point in their life, and you just got to keep going. You got two choices. You can just keep going forward and keep going backwards. And so sometimes you just got to fly blind a little bit.
Okay. That's really good advice, though. That's really good.
I mean, sometimes it's kind of like, like running through quicksand, and the only thing you can do is kind of keep your legs moving,
Yeah, I definitely get it. All right. So the next question is, what is the number one thing you focused on to achieve? What was the number one thing you focused on to achieve your level of success, in your opinion?
Finding out what I really wanted to do. I think to me that's really important. Certainly, like I would say so. I come from a family of kind of like Type A personalities, but also everyone in my family has always like worked a job,
Mm-hmm.
and for me, and I'm the youngest of five, and so everyone's always worked a job. My parents have always worked, or my dad's always worked a job, and they kind of come from like the more traditional background, where it's like not entrepreneurial and like not having a job is seen as like being not just a little risky, like tremendously risky. Like my mom, God bless her, I love her, goes from like zero to worst case scenario like in the blink of an eye. So I think understanding that, we all grow up with certain influences and certain beliefs, and at some point you have to make a choice and decide that you're going to believe what you believe and throw away the stuff that doesn't work for you, and it might be everything. And I kind of went through that, and so it was just deciding what was right for me and not listening to anybody else.
And so it's like a lot of clarity going on.
Yeah, like Warren Buffett has this great saying. He says, "If I want a second opinion, I look in the mirror."
Yeah, it's definitely a great quote right there. So like when you were going through that process of going through you having to go through from being almost broke to getting back to where you are or going better, like what was the thing you like really had to hone down to get back up to your level or get back past it?
I don't know if it was one thing. I would say mainly it was probably just focus. I think in terms of like you got to focus on what you want to do. I think actually, if it was one thing, I would say it was cutting out the time, the wasted time, and by that I mean like not filling your schedule with low value activities, and also not filling your life with low value people. I would say the hardest thing I had to do was cut a lot of people out of my life. I cut a lot of people out of my life, and I thought it was crazy until I talked to another guy I knew who like went through a divorce. So I'm in my 40s, he's in his 40s, and he went through a divorce, and he was like, I lost like all my friends because all my friends were like my wife's friends and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I went through like a 2-year process of my life where like I reassessed everything, and he was like, I basically just got all new friends, like I rebuilt my life from scratch, and I kind of went through some of that, like, I stopped talking to a lot of people that I used to hang out with. I stopped hanging out with a lot of people that I hung out with. And you have some people who tell you they think you're a snob or something like that. Or, I had my best friend that I grew up with from high school and childhood. I was the best man at his wedding. I haven't spoken to him in 5 years.
Dang.
And what happened was, I'm in the city. He lives outside of the city. We have different lives. He lives in the suburbs. And I would go down there and like he would never want to talk about anything. And I find like entrepreneurs are like interested in everything.
Yeah.
Like he would just like want to sit around and watch football, and I just was like really bored. So finally one day I was like, why don't you guys come up to the city? And they're like, oh, we can't do that. We have kids. And I just said to them, I said, you're full of shit, man. I said, you live his wife, Jen. I said, Jen's family is, there's like 20 people all around you. You guys have babysitter all the time. Just asking you to come up like one time. And they wouldn't do it. And his wife was like, why don't you come down here and just like watch a game? And I was like, I don't really want to do that anymore. I'm interested in different stuff. And she literally told me that I was a bad person for changing. And I was just like, have a nice life. And that was a hard thing to do. I felt really guilty about it for a while. And then I realized, but I learned from talking to other people that when you change, other people will be resentful of that because they're stuck in their crappy lives. And you know what? That's their responsibility. Like, don't ever take responsibility for anyone else's life. Unless you're a parent, then you have to be responsible for your kid. But don't ever take responsibility for anyone else's life.
Some very strong words you just said just now. So you basically like changed your entire circle of influence in a matter of a year.
It took more than a year, but yeah,
okay.
I did it. And I'm still in the process of doing it. And by the way, some of those people might be related to you.
In what way?
Well, some of the people that you want to hang out with less might be family.
Oh yeah.
And you have to make the decision that that you're not going to hang out with them.
I totally get it, and when it comes to like my entrepreneurship, like I barely see my parents anymore. I'm just with my girl right now, and it's sometimes it's just like you become an introvert when you get so involved in your work and your craft that you can get lost in the fact that that you're not necessarily dependent on other people to get to where you want to be or to control their happiness. You see what I'm saying? And I think that's what you were trying to say is like in a sense of to where you recognize that you're not in control of anybody else's happiness but your own.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't do anything about that. And I mean, my parents live just a couple miles from me. They live in the city as well, and they're older now. I mean, they're at the age where some of their friends are no longer here. So I do try to see them because someone gave me a good piece of advice. I said, no matter what your relationship with your parents is, when they're gone, you'll miss them. But having said that, there are certain things I do and don't talk about with them. There are certain things I don't bring up. Who was it? Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, said she didn't tell her family about it for a year. She waited because she just didn't want to hear it. And so there is kind of that too. Sometimes you just don't want to hear it from people. And sometimes like if you just really don't get along with a family member, sometimes you just kind of have to wish them well and say, hey, I hope they're happy, but I'm going to do my thing. Or sometimes, you just kind of compartmentalize your relationship with them.
So was your family supportive of you? Were they not?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're fine now. And it's not that they've ever been like unsupportive or something like that. I think some of it is that they don't get it. I think some of it, I mean, one thing I realized is that one of the reasons that they didn't do the things they wanted to do is because they were scared. And a lot of times that fear will kind of rub off on you. And you have to just be careful not to let that happen.
Yeah, I totally get it. You gotta put up some boundaries in a sense.
Yeah, well, and I think it's also, it's just like one of those things of, being conscious of what's going on in your own head. And, understanding, a lot of times you grow up with the beliefs. I mean, basically you grow up with the beliefs that you just kind of absorbed and learned as a kid. And those typically never go away. Like, if you want to understand why that happens, so being a student of the financial markets are all about psychology, like 100%. They're not about, the financial markets have nothing to do with, like, economics or fundamentals for the most part. They really don't. They're almost entirely psychological. And so from that and also being, like, in the kind of consumer and retail business, I really had to learn about psychology. And so what happens is that until you're 7 or 8, you have no ability to think logically whatsoever. Your brain has not developed.
Yeah.
So everything you take in is through subconscious. And your subconscious doesn't really have the ability to interpret anything at all. So you're like a sponge for whatever positive or negative beliefs that come into your head. And if you don't change those beliefs either consciously or unconsciously at some point in your life, you will grow up as an adult with those same beliefs, which is why some people grow up and they're screwed up. Or they're just not functional. It's not their fault. It's they never got past that hurdle. And that's why, people get really triggered by their family a lot as well, because it's like all those beliefs that are coming back. It's like, that's why if you ever feel like you're fighting against yourself, that's why, because you subconsciously, you believe one thing, but on a deeper level, you have who you naturally are and what you want to believe, and they're fighting each other. It's called cognitive dissonance. And that's what makes it so powerful, because the belief is such that you think it's true. You believe it's true.
Yeah.
So telling yourself that what you believe is not true is really difficult. That's one of those dark side of the moon things. You just have to literally keep repeating it to yourself until you change the belief.
Okay.
That's why discovering what you believe is so powerful, because once you discover what you truly believe, those disempowering beliefs, they start to fall away. The reason you believe them and they control your life is because you don't know that you're thinking that way.
Okay, so it's like a lot of self-awareness in a sense, because like when you were talking about cognitive dissonance, of you fighting yourself the inner battle that's going on in between your head, that can be like, I see why like a lot of people just don't get entrepreneurship in the first place, because it challenges a lot of their belief systems. And when people are put outside of their habits or daily habits, because as humans we're programmed to be habitual, and when they're putting outside the daily habits, even just for a short period of time, they'll just get flustered, or they'll get really overwhelmed immediately, because it's something out of the norm, and that usually scares off a lot of people. And we do it on like a whole nother level. You see what I'm saying? We constantly deal with risk, challenges, and problems. So
Yeah, well, I would take that one step further and say that. So when you become an entrepreneur, what you're doing is you're brushing up against all of your older beliefs, the disempowering stuff, and those are the things that scare you. So it's like, like one of my things with money was that I would get rid of money because I believed on some level that money was bad. And I'll just give you some concrete examples of this. And I'm not trying to criticize my family because they're really great. And so I say this as someone who says, I know my family's really great. If I ever need anything, they would be there for me in a heartbeat. They're all really good people. They're really successful. My nieces and nephews are, they're awesome. They did a great job raising their kids and all that stuff. But there are some things that I don't agree with them with. And I think that's okay. And I think that's part of becoming adult is understanding that you can disagree with some people on some level, but not hate them or dislike them. You got to kind of just try to find what's good in them and just focus on that. But having said that, I have a brother who thinks that most people in the world are assholes. He told me that. He's like, man, people are assholes, And, I have another family member that says, when she goes shopping, she gets, uncomfortable. And I realized that one of the beliefs I've had was, and, my father is the kind of guy, he's not really a hoarder, but he buys a lot of stuff, and he can, be possessive of his stuff. So I realized, one of the beliefs that I developed was that, money was bad, and only, people who have money must be assholes. But I realized I never really thought that on some level, so that creates up a conflict, right? So on one level, I want money, but on another level, I think it's bad to have money. So now I have a lot of guilt around it, and that's what happens when you become an. I won't restrict it to say becoming an entrepreneur. I would say that's what happens when you try to challenge yourself and bust out of your comfort zone. You're going to brush up against that stuff all the time, and I used to think, people don't struggle like that. And I realized successful people are successful because they struggled like that and overcame that. The unsuccessful people quit. People don't realize how fucking hard it is to be successful. It can be so brutal sometimes. It can be, as you said, it can be lonely as hell. Arnold Schwarzenegger said something about that all the time he spent as a bodybuilder in the gym, training in the gym, and and pushing through the physical resistance and mental resistance of being in the gym set him up later in life. And I understand that because I'm very active. I'm in the gym 6 or 7 days a week. And I go there and I train, incredibly hard. And one of the reasons I do it is for the mental part. There are times you go there and you're pushing through the resistance in your body and you can physically feel it so much, you feel like you're going to burst or you're going to suffocate, and you have to calm yourself down and keep going. And I think that's, whether you do it in the gym or somewhere else, that's a great metaphor for life. Sometimes you just got to push through that stuff. And what it really is it's understanding that you have to push through the conflict in your beliefs. That whenever you feel that discomfort, a lot of times it is your beliefs, your natural beliefs, and the ones that you kind of developed through your earlier years are colliding with each other, and they don't necessarily agree. And you're going to have to decide which one's going to win out.
Yeah, I get it. So that's exactly why I hit the gym to myself, is for that mental strength in developing that as well. So it's not just physical. But so were you active as a kid? Did you do sports or something?
I did, but I actually got more active as an adult. I would say about 6 or 7 years ago. I was always in the gym a decent amount, but I would probably carry in 20 extra pounds or something like that. I just finally decided I'm going to learn, I'm going to get in shape, and it became a real transformation for me, in the sense that I had to learn how to eat, I had to learn how to train, and I still am learning stuff every day. And then for a few years I just did not like it, and then once I got into it and started realizing the benefits of it, that's when it became kind of a lifestyle thing for me.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and hop into the next one. What is one piece of advice you would give to someone who has nothing to lose and becoming an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur?
Go for it.
Go for it.
Find something you want to do, go for it. Having said that, I would also say you got to have a business idea. It's funny. I sat down with, matter of fact, a guy I know from my gym who had some ideas. He's a model here in Boston, and he's got some influence on the social and fashion scene. And so he kind of had these ideas that he wanted to do. And finally, I said to him, I'm dude, you just have an idea. You need to put a business around it. And he turned me on to a friend of his who custom makes suits and wants to sell them online. And he's like, well, I want to introduce you to this guy. Maybe you can sit down with him. And I basically was like, let me find out if this guy knows what he's about before I, frankly, waste my time sitting down with him. So I sent him, an email just with some basic questions. And he's like, well, I'm thinking of doing like a Kickstarter campaign to ease the financing and the production issues. And, I'm looking for a space, and beyond that, we'll see where it goes. And I just emailed him back, and I was like, I was like, you don't have a business. I was like, that's why you're nowhere. And I told this friend, I didn't tell this guy because I'd never met him before. I was super blunt. I was like, this is why this guy's been doing this for 6 months to a year, and it's absolutely nowhere. He's got no plan. I was like, not only that, he has no goal, and he's not thinking about anything. It's like he thinks that he can go to Kickstarter, and that's going to solve his production issues. Kickstarter, you can get financing, but if you're making custom-made suits, you got to handle production yourself. And I was just rattling off questions. I was like, where's he going to source the material? His price points are twice as high as everyone else online. Why is someone going to buy from them when they go to like Indochino.com, which has great customer service and fulfillment, for half the price? How is he going to? I was like, he's getting some local guy to sell his stuff. What happens when he ramps up production? I know someone who makes a sports supplement, and he had problems with his production. He had to go to a bigger facility, and he was out of product for a month. And fortunately, he has a really good, his audience really loves his product, so that was okay for him. It didn't really hurt his business. But there's just so many things that you got to think about, and I see a lot of people have ideas, but they're really not committed, and it comes down to being committed. They're like, oh, I think I'll do this, or I think I'll do that, and I'm just basically like, as I said, I tend to be blunt. I'm like, look, you got to pull your head out and get real. Mm-hmm. Like, if you want to do this, you got to have a plan. Like, what's your goal? Where do you want to go? You don't have to have like a written step-by-step plan because it's always going to change, but have like a basic plan. Have a goal. Your goal can always change, but if you don't have anything you're aiming for, you're going to get nowhere. It's like if you're in your car and you don't have a destination, you're just going to keep driving around the block. And I would say 90-something% of the people end up doing that. Like, people just are afraid to commit and afraid to have a plan. And I've seen it with bigger businesses too. I mean, I've seen it, I've worked at agencies and worked on multi-million-dollar campaigns for, companies like GM, and seen them throw away money because they didn't have a plan. And so it's not, and I have a long-time client who has a really, really good product, and he's just gone nowhere because he won't commit to a plan. And if you don't have a plan and you don't know where you're going, then you're never going to get anywhere.
Okay. Yeah, that's very important. So what's your definition of a business plan? Because when you told that guy that he doesn't have a clear business plan, would you find out?
A formal business plan, mm-hmm. But you need to you understand, like, this is my goal. So for him, it's like, I'm going to manufacture these types of suits. This is like, first of all, hey, you have to start with an audience. So, who's your target audience? And you can't say, well, guys who need suits. Every guy needs a suit. Is it going to be, how old are they? What's their style? Where do they live? How much money do they have? Mm. Where else are they shopping? Where else are they spending their money? Who's your audience? What are their psychographics? What are their demographics? Like, all that stuff. Why do they want your suit? What are their wants and needs? What are their latent or hidden desires? Stuff like that. And then start with your audience, and then your plan is basically how you're going to fulfill that need. Because all of your production and your financing comes through, how am I going to deliver the product that fills that need? And so then the plan has to be, so for him, here's how I'm going to manufacture my suits. Here's how I'm at least thinking about scaling up my production, once it gets bigger. Here's where I'm going to start. Here's where I'm hopefully going to finish. And then you also, so for him, it was like part of the business plan. So, I realize I'm kind of not being super specific about this, but I would say start with your audience, and then figure out how you're going to structure your business. So for this guy, with the online suits, how are you going to build your store online? Who's going to host your store? What's your store going to look like? What are the capabilities going to be like? How are you going to get traffic? How are you going to monetize that traffic? How are you going to upsell people? How are you going to maximize lifetime value of your customer? Mm-hmm. Like, all that stuff is super important in retail. And so to me, that's a plan. It's like, here's basically how I'm going to do it. And at least now you have a place to start. And for him, it's like, who might I partner with? Who could I work with as influencers or something like that? Who can I approach? Who can I talk to? Because when you approach people, if you know what you're talking about, they're going to be attracted to that. And particularly the people who you want funding from. So for anyone who wants funding, wants to get venture funding, you have to have a plan. You have to have a plan about how you're going to make money.
That makes sense, because you got to pay it back, of course.
Well, no, venture funding is not borrowing. Venture funding is taking investment. But, it's not like it was 10 years ago where they just throw money at anyone. I mean, they're throwing a lot of money at people, but more and more they want to see a plan of how you're going to make that money back.
Yeah.
In other words, when you get, so I don't know how many people in your audience would ever want to get VC funding, but basically the way VCs look at it is they want a multiple of their money back. So say you have a company that has, they give you $1 million in funding for a 10%, for a $10 million valuation. So in other words, they value your company at $10 million, and they say we'll invest in 10% of it. For that, we'll give you $1 million. So for them, they want a minimum of 3 times multiple, 3 to 5 times multiple, which means they want 3 to 5 times their money back, which means that your company has to sell or be valued at 30 to 50 million for them for it to be worth it. So they're going to be looking at your company and basically saying, how do you get to 50 million? Now, that doesn't mean in revenue, because your revenue doesn't have to be, your valuation is going to be higher than your revenue. But they're going to say, how do you get to a $50 million valuation? If you can't answer that question, they're not going to give you the money. And there's a lot of people out there who are like wannabes, and there's a lot of people who get into this who do it because they're unhappy in their lives. They just want to quit their job, and they're not really thinking things through. And really what they want is someone to tell them how awesome they are, and they're going to make a lot of money, and they don't want to have to work for it, and they don't want to have to, be challenged. And that just doesn't work.
I get it. So it's not enough to just want to quit your job. You gotta have
that was the reason I threw out all these questions to this guy that I never met before, is I wanted to see, is he going to come back and answer the challenge? And if so, I don't care if he doesn't have a business yet, then I'll meet with him because I know he's worth something. But if he just kind of poo-poos it and was like, oh, I haven't really thought of it, I'm not going to waste my time because I know he's not going anywhere, at least not yet.
Yeah, you got to want it. Yeah.
And so I'll do that a lot. I'll throw out challenges to people. Well, I mean, I think it's a different audience is my point. They might have, if they're doing $1 to $10 million, they have different problems than someone who's doing 400 to 800,000. Someone who's doing $1 to $10 million is doing better online.
Yeah, most definitely.
So they have a different kind of set of problems, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So I actually have a guy I might be able to introduce you to, as a matter of fact, who might help you out.
Okay.
He works for a company that helps e-commerce companies basically recover chargebacks.
Mm-hmm.
But it might be a network you can plug into.
Okay, all right, that'd be awesome. We can talk after this.
Yeah.
All right. So,
you're gonna have to edit out this part of the conversation.
I'm gonna cut this out.
Do some editing, man.
I'll do the editing.
Kind of gone off the rails here.
Let me go ahead and wrap around on. Well, see what the last question is. Okay, how can people go ahead and get a hold of you or reach you for any of your products?
Well, they could just they can go to my website. That's actually just my portfolio site. It's in process right now.
Okay.
But it's petedavis.info, and I'll just put it in the chat box here.
All right. Yeah.
And I'll just give you my email here too, petedavisesq@gmail.com.
All right. Yeah. I'll put it in the link and also in the video as well.
Yeah, so they can hit me up at either one of those places.
All right. Yeah. So I don't mean to hold you up for your time if you're busy or anything like that.
Yeah, I do got to roll. I'm looking at the clock though, but it was great talking to you.
Yeah, most definitely. All right. So let's plan on talking like sometime next year or something like that.
All right, man. Keep in touch.
All right. Talk to you later.
Thanks, Cameron.
All right.